Oh, what's up GameLeap? It's the Jizz, and in today's video we're going to be talking about 15 champions that the players in high elo Korea are currently abusing for 12.1. Now some of these champions are definitely well known, but some of them are flying under the radar and you would not guess the roles these guys are playing these champions in. They have the highest win rates in the game, and this video won't just be a countdown. I'll be giving you the runes, the build, the skill order, everything you need, the summoner spells as well, to know exactly what to run in your game so you can win just as much as some of the best players in Korea. Now to master any of these champions on this countdown, make sure you check out the GameLeap website in the description and comment section for all your League of Legends needs. We're talking champion courses, guides, high elo VOD analyses where we point out what the best players in the world do that everyone else doesn't do, so you can give yourself the chance to become challenger in season 12. So get that exclusive access, and let's start off the countdown by talking about one champion who got nerfed in 12.1 but is still being abused by the best players in the world, and this is Rek'Sai. So for Rek'Sai, your ease damage has been nerfed to later ranks, but the good news is that at rank 1, it's actually higher than what it was. So the skill order is going to continue to be to max your Q first, even though this probably wasn't as good, but it's definitely the play now. And even though you won't be burrowing as much in the late game because this cooldown has increased, it's not like you were getting to the late game anyway in Rek'Sai. Your goal when playing this champion is to gank lanes and snowball out of control, so by the time you do get to 20-25 minutes, the game is already over. And what's continuing in 12.1 is the fact that Conqueror, the stacking is staying at 5 seconds, which doesn't really matter that much for Rek'Sai because you do stack it so quickly, but it is certainly nice this is staying at 5 seconds for another patch. But beating Rek'Sai to number 14 on this countdown, this is a very underrated champion in pretty much all elos, and this is playing Graves but not in the jungle or even in the top lane. I'm talking about playing Graves in the mid lane because you beat so many close range champions. And before you look at the toughest matchups and say that Yasuo, you have a 0% win rate against him. But apart from that, the reason why Graves mid is so good is because you pretty much always have priority. Your Q is an amazing wave clear ability, and by getting priority you enable your jungler to make plays around the map, and because you're such a good scaling champion, even though some matchups might be tough, you're always going to be in a game because you deal so much damage. Even though shield bow has been nerfed this patch, so the shield is down and the attack damage is down, but here's the thing with shield bow which I've mentioned in other videos. It's the fact that you're getting the bonus AD when the shield procs. So this means when the shield procs, you actually do the most damage out of anyone on the rift. So it's still definitely the best mythic to go. And then going collector, because in the mid lane the enemy champion is going to be squishy, you will blow them to bits. Just make sure you're taking presence of mind in your precision tree, and also starting with a D-Blade because your mana issues are backed up not just by presence of mind but also biscuit delivery in the inspiration tree, so we can focus on having a very good lane with the D-Blade start. So if you see a close range champion guys picked in the mid lane from the enemy mid laner and champ select, seriously consider locking in Graves. Now another mid laner who's performing very well this patch and is being abused at the moment by the best Korean players, this is Malzahar, and look at these stats. Now I know the sample size for some of these champions is going to be small, but the season has really just started. But still, 15 matches with this rune setup, you're winning 10 of them. 14 matches with this win rate, well, that's at least 10 wins. This looks legit, and Malzahar for so long now has been one of the most consistent mid laners. Now for sure, you do have some hard matchups against ranged champions like Lux, Xerath, who can proc your passive very easily, so I would be a little bit careful when you do blind pick Malzahar, but as a counter pick to lots of the assassins and close range champions in the game, you can put so much pressure on them because your wave clear it's so good, and the Never Grasp when you're just holding on to this, it's pretty much impossible for any enemy champion to jump onto you. Just make sure you're aware of your passive cooldown and you try to protect this. But beating Malzahar to number 12 in this countdown is, to be honest, probably one of the worst champions across the board on the Rift, but in high elo in Korea, these guys make him work because they're so good on him, and this is Olaf in the jungle. Now for Olaf for sure, he's been hit so hard, and if we go back to like last season at this time, he was in such a good position because Gore Drinker was so good, but now the revert in his passive has actually made him kind of strong, especially against certain team compositions. So if you see on the enemy team someone lock in Twisted Fate or a mage who's got some sort of CC ability which you can just run straight through, Olaf's value goes through the roof. And like I mentioned for Rek'Sai, the Conqueror stacking, the fact it's staying at 5 seconds is very nice indeed. But one thing that is interesting here that these Korean players are doing, they are running Hail Blade instead of Ember Knife. Ember Knife is probably going to be the more popular build path because of the red smite active it gives you when you do smite 5 times. But the Hail Blade, the benefit here is the fact that it empowers your ganks. So when you get to the mid game and everyone's level 6, the blue smite allows you to chase champions down because against good players, they're going to be able to kite you. This makes sure that you can catch up to them, land your undertows, which you are maxing. So it's a very low-key broken setup, and there are some specificities here, so make sure you have these sorted before you get in game on Olaf jungle. But beating Olaf to the number 11 spot on this countdown is the best champion in the game in the moment. Like, I don't care what anyone says, because of the teleport change that came in, especially for top laners, Shen has really stood out because of his stand unite and his ultimate. Because nowadays in the first 14 minutes, you can only TP to towers. headshots, which kind of sucks. If you're a playmaking top laner or you have some really good like team fighting potential, 90% of the time you're not going to get to that fight in time. If it's a dragon, like there's no tower near dragon, so how do you get there? Well, you can't. You're stuck on an island. But for Shen, because you're stand united, you point to an allied champion and bang, you're in that fight and impacting it immediately. And just a couple of things here, we're running Shield Bash for our passive and also our ultimate, and we're also running Ultimate Hunter because we want to get as many stand uniteds off. And to be honest, it's a really snowbally setup here. And it's also kind of funny on this page, if you look at the skill buff, there aren't any skills recommended past level 11. This is because by this point, the game should already be over. So if you want to win games super early, Shen is probably the best pick. And Shen also has a pretty strong lane, but coming in at number 10 is the champion who probably has a stronger lane than Shen, so if you want to dominate in the top lane for 12.1, Urgot is definitely a champion you should consider. Now what's interesting here, the other day I recommended you guys to rush Hullbreaker and then build Titanic Hydra. Well, what these Korean players are doing are going Steel Cats first because most of the time they're probably going to be going against a lethal tempo fighter, so we're going to cuck their auto attack damage and then we're going Titanic Hydra. This is still a core item of course because of the cleave passive, it works with our purge, which is what we're maxing, and then we're going Black Cleaver because in high reloads what happens is that players know how to kite you, so the movement speed from Black Cleaver is invaluable. It allows you to stick to the enemy champion so you can continue to deal damage with your purge, and if one Q lands, if you can land your E, they are 100% going to die. So press the attack Urgot comes in at number 10, but beating Urgot to number 9, I'm so sorry guys, we're gonna have to stay in the top lane for this one. This is one of those auto attackers who Shen does very well into, and this is Tryndamere with lethal tempo. And for Tryndamere this patch, if we think about that teleport change, because we don't really need to run teleport on Tryndamere, we can run flash and ghost, and look at this, a 57% win rate in over 400 matches, and this is in Korean high elo. These players are legit. And really the key to this setup you see on your screen here is the sustain, because there are lots of hard matchups for Tryndamere top lane, especially in the early going. So our goal is to get through these so we can get to our Berserker Screes, Gale Force, Quick Blade Spike as free as we can. This is why we're running Revitalize in our runes, because it will work with our Q's heal, and we're also starting D-Blade to give us a bit more trading potential and also a bit of HP and sustain as well. But we're going to head to the jungle for this next pick, and this is Sejuani in the jungle. And I know you guys are looking at the summoner spells, and look at this, 2 matches, 100% win rate with Smite and Ignite, like you're kidding yourself. Now, you can run Ignite or you can run Flash, I don't really care, but it's just the fact that this champion with this rune setup, 70% win rate, and also if we look in the bottom left, what's kind of interesting here, running Ember Knife, 75 matches and a 64% win rate. This is real, this is not made up, and it kind of goes against what you would think, but running Ember Knife gives you a lot of dueling potential in the jungle, and once you get Sunflower Aegis, because it's the best tank dueling mythic, it's very difficult to beat a Sejuani 1v1, and most junglers these days are going to be melee champions, which really helps in this department. And it becomes even more free to pick Sejuani when you have a lot of melee champions on your team, because these can help proc your permafrost passive and the stun that goes with it. But beating Sejuani to number 7 on this countdown, this is GP, and I said in a couple of videos ago that Gangplank was the most underrated champion in the game. And I understand that GP might not have the best win rates in lower elos, but look at this when he's played by the best players. Now what's helped this patch for sure is the buffs that actually came into GP, so the fact your Q is on a lower cooldown and the mana cost is down. This is big, it makes you way more of a lane bully, and lots of people kind of had this misconception that GP is a very good scaling champion. I mean, he kind of is because of his powder keg, and when this gets to a really low cooldown and you get more of them, for sure, at level 13 this is a big spike. But by this point, lots of the enemy champions have mobility and they know what you're trying to do. It's very hard to land a lot of barrels onto good players. So in the early game during the laning phase, this is really when you are at your strongest, and these buffs just accentuate that fact. This is why we're going to run Ignite as one of our summoner spells, because it just means we're unbeatable during lane. We are the most annoying lane bully, and this is also why we're running 2 Adaptive Force, so we can get as much poke and harass off as possible, because we don't really need the attack speed. Now as far as our mythic item goes, Trinity Force is definitely the best. I know lots of people are testing with Prowler's Claw at the moment, and for sure you can one-shot champions, but only players who have their monitors turned off. This might work in a couple of games, but to be honest, out of a big sample size, Prowler's Claw is just too risky. Trinity Force is by far the most consistent, so make sure you guys are building this. But beating GP to number 6, we're heading back to the jungle for this one, and this is Rumble. And in particular, First Strike Rumble in the jungle, which is pretty interesting, but to be honest, it makes sense. And it's really because of your ultimate, because let's be honest, the range on this thing, you can use it from Dragon into the ball lane. So getting First Strike, you're always going to be able to proc this, and this is why we're also running Ultimate Hunter, so we lower the cooldown of that equalizer, so we can get more of these off, do more damage for your First Strike, and therefore get more gold. And the rest of the build is very simple stuff with Rocket Belt, Sork Shoe, Shadow Flame, which is giving you a lot of AP and then HP, which are both very important stats on Rumble. And remember, with this item, you're still getting magic penetration from Rocket Belt's mythic passive, so it's a very strong setup here in Rumble, particularly if the enemy team is very close range, is going to pop off. But starting off the top 5 is a champion who you probably expect to be played in the mid lane more often than not, but this is Galio as a support. And the rune page we're running is pretty much exactly the same as in the mid lane. Now we're running an extra armor rune, and we're also running second wind because in the bot lane at the moment, lots of champions you probably see are going to be enchantresses like Nami, Lulu, Soraka, Sona, so second wind gives us the lane sustain. But really the power here is going Nimbus Cloak in our secondary tree, because if we think about this, Nimbus Cloak increases our movement speed when we use a summoner spell. So on Galio, when we flash and taunt in, which we are maxing first, look at this, the enemy champion, even if they do flash away, because of the movement speed we have from the cloak, we are going to be able to gap close to them, land our taunt and the combo, and they are 100% going to die. And you can even see when we're running flash and ignite and this setup, Galio players in Korean high elo have close to a 60% win rate, and that's in over 170 matches. So definitely give this setup a shot in your game. Now coming in at number 4, to be honest, is one of the most unique champions on the Rift, and this is Aurelion Sol. And there's a lot of interesting things going on this page right here. So we're running Ignite for our laning phase, and we're also running Electrocute and Relentless Hunter, so we can not just win the trades in the mid lane but get around the map. And we're also running Minion Dematerializer. This means that our pushing power is beyond belief and no one can actually stand up to it, so we can shove mid and roam around the map. And as far as our mythic item goes, we want to be going Crown of the Shattered Queen. Some people might be going Everfrost or Luden's Tempest, whatever it is, but Crown of the Shattered Queen is by far the best because once you're jumped on as Aurelion Sol, you're probably going to die. This damage reduction passive the Crown gives you is going to mean that you're not going to die to these assassins who jump onto your head. And if we just think about Aurelion Sol's roaming potential for a second as well, remember that teleport has been changed in the first 14 minutes really for the worse. So if you are a champion with really good innate roaming like Aurelion Sol, you are going to be so much better in 12.1 for it, so a very underrated pick here. Now a bit like Galio, you might expect this number 3 champion to be played in the jungle more often than not, but for Shaco support, this is a champion who's currently loving life in Korean high elo in the bot lane. And as a former challenger Shaco, I will just say this, Shaco support really pops off when the enemy team has a lot of dive champions. So they have a lot of hard engage, they want to get in close range to you because that's when you're Jack in the Box, which you are maxing, that's when you'll hallucinate. All of these things come into play. If you're playing against someone like a Nami, for example, a Vel'Koz, a Brand, who you have bad win rates against, these champions you can't really proc your box which you are maxing, and it's very hard to be effective. You're probably one of the most useless supports in these matchups, so make sure you're picking Shaco support as a counter pick to lots of hard engages, like Leona, Nautilus, Alistair. These definitely make way more sense. And as far as your mythic and core items, Everfrost because we want to root the enemy champion so our box can fear them and then deal the damage, Lucidity Boots because we're all about cooldown, same thing with Zhonya's, and also the survivability that Zhonya's is giving us. But beating the Shaq to the silver medal on this countdown, guys, this is Veigar in the mid lane. And for Veigar, we're Predator, Cheap Shot, and Genius Hunter, and we're running Everfrost for that reason, so the actives cooldown this is going to be lowered. And in our inspiration tree, we're running Futures Market because scaling is very important. So getting to Sork Shoes, which is our first item, then getting to Lost Chapter, so we can build this into Everfrost. This is very important. We want to get to our mid and late game items as soon as possible, and we're also getting a tier in here as well and upgrading this later to an Archangel Staff. Remember, this item is now 2600 gold, or is staying at 2600 gold, which is 400 gold cheaper than what it was before. And look at the win rate, 16 matches over an 81% win rate. You are kidding yourself, Veigar. So if you have a chance to pick this champion, guys, definitely do it, but do be careful about hard engages and assassins because Veigar is a very fragile champion, so that is something certainly to think about in Champ Select. But the number 1 champion, guys, that Korean high elo players are abusing right now, this is a top laner, and I want to see if you can guess it. Who do you think it is? Let me know in the comments. And the champion is, can we have a drum roll? It's Heimerdinger in the top lane, the Donger. Now why is Heimerdinger all of a sudden so good? Well, the big reason is the fact that teleport has been changed, so the top lane is more of an island at the moment, and Heimerdinger, because he's such a strong laner, his power therefore this patch is kind of enhanced because of this little summoner spell change. Now we're still running teleport because we want to be in lane as much as we can, but we're also running ignite, no flash, because what are we really using flash for? If we have ignite, we want champions to jump onto us. We want champions to be near our turrets so we can combo them and deal a ton of damage. Now interestingly enough though, in the top lane we are maxing our W first for the poke. This is why we're running Comet as our keystone, because it's going to be so annoying to deal with for any melee champion. Now as far as your mythic goes, we're running Leandrius because in the top lane pretty much every champion is going to have some form of HP, so the tick damage, the burn, this is very important. And then with sorcerer issues and Shadow Flame, it is all but over for the enemy top laner. So the most oppressive champion, the best champion at the moment, guys, is Heimerdinger for 12.1 based on win rates. And if you did enjoy this video, remember to leave a like down below to let us know about that fact, and also remember to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our future season 12 uploads. And until tomorrow's daily upload, this has been Coach. Cheers.